Vladimir Putin spoke for almost 4 hours last week in a speech that included jokes about a nuclear apocalypse, insults aimed at his least favourite European leaders, and a series of rants about how the West has rigged the international system against Russia.
Игра эта, безусловно, опасная, кровавая и, я бы сказал, грязная.
Here, we break down what exactly the Russian leader said and what he is trying to achieve with his increasingly strident rhetoric. Perhaps the most important concept floated by Putin during his speech was the multipolar world, which he insists Russia is trying to create. In such a world, Putin says Western countries would be sidelined, with the likes of Moscow, Beijing and Tehran given more power. He believes the current order was imposed on the world as a legacy of colonialism and maintained because the West cannot tolerate anything different from itself. Most of the world's people are unhappy with the established order, Putin argues, and it is only a matter of time before Western hegemony crumbles. It is this belief in crumbling Western order that is thought to have played a large part in his decision to invade Ukraine and his efforts to ally Russia to China. But in reality, he is the one who has crushed dissent, jailed opposition leaders, cracked down on free speech, and attacked his neighbour to stop it pulling away from Russia's grip. Putin tried to lift the mood at the Moscow think tank where he delivered his speech with a light-hearted joke about nuclear Armageddon. During a Q&A session, host Fyodor Lukyanov recalled that Putin previously told Russians they shouldn't fear dying in an atomic attack because they would become martyrs, while their enemies would simply croak.
И мы как мученики попадем в рай, а они просто сдохнут.
Lukyanov asked Putin to reassure his audience that he's in no hurry to take them to paradise. The Russian leader responded with a long silence, which Lukyanov said was not reassuring. Putin then cracked a smile before adding,
Специально задумался, чтобы вы насторожились. Эффект достигнут.
The remark came just days after Russia held large-scale nuclear drills, which propagandists said were rehearsals for retaliation strikes on the UK and the US. Putin used other parts of his speech to repeat his threat that nuclear weapons can be used to protect the territorial integrity of Russia. According to the Kremlin, Russia includes occupied parts of Ukraine that Putin has annexed. Despite making repeated nuclear threats on state TV, Putin also accused the West of scaremongering in order to turn the world against Russia. Putin wants the world to know he won't hesitate to use nuclear weapons if he feels the regime's survival is at stake. Putin also joined in the international ridicule of Liz Truss, who last week left office as Britain's shortest-serving Prime Minister. Referencing a remark Truss made during a Conservative hustings event back in August, Putin said Truss had confirmed her readiness to use nuclear weapons. The girl is a little out of her mind, Putin quipped, adding that Joe Biden should have publicly scolded her.
Близко к тексту. Я к этому готов. Ну как, понимаете, и никто ведь никак не отреагировал. Ну, допустим, она ляпнула там, девушка как немножко не в себе.
He brought up Truss's comments as evidence that the West is threatening Russia with nuclear weapons, and not the other way around. But Putin has either misunderstood or deliberately misrepresented the context. Truss made the remark when asked whether she would be willing to use nuclear weapons in the event that Britain was attacked first. Truss said,
I think it's an important duty of the Prime Minister. I'm ready to do that.
Putin also spoke days before it was revealed Truss's phone had been hacked by suspected Russian agents. Perhaps there is more ridicule to come. Putin also reserves special criticism for French President Emmanuel Macron, who has led European efforts to negotiate with the Kremlin over Ukraine. Macron was one of the last Western leaders to visit Putin in Moscow before the war began and has regularly spoken with him on the phone ever since. During one of those calls, Macron allowed a French television crew to film his conversation, something Putin said they had not agreed beforehand. Putin said he now assumes that every one of his calls with Macron is being recorded and said it has damaged the trust between them. He also appeared to poke fun at Macron at another point in his speech, saying it's impossible to talk to European leaders because they cannot agree anything and always default to Washington. Speaking about Russian involvement in Syria, Putin recalled meeting with one of the European leaders in Moscow where they agreed concrete next steps. Putin added,
От нас из Москвы полетел в Вашингтон. вернулся в Париж, все забыто, как будто и не было никаких договоренностей. Ну как разговаривать? О чем?
It's safe to say Macron is probably not on Putin's Christmas card list. Putin once again revisited his denials that Russia had anything to do with the underwater explosions that destroyed the Nord Stream 1 and 2 gas pipelines back in September. Western countries believe a Russian submarine was most likely to blame. But Putin is throwing his weight behind the theory that the US did it. He claimed that photos exist, taken by energy giant Gazprom back in 2016, that show an explosive lodged underneath the pipe. Putin claimed the bomb was American-made and that Washington told him it was lost during a training exercise.
Еще хватает наглости еще там показывать, а может это Россия взорвала? Сама себя взорвала Россия. Совсем с ума сошли, что ли? Нет, тем не менее, делают это. Вот опубликовал же, по-моему, «Газпром» даже снимки 2016.
Later, he threatened to cut Europe off from Russian gas entirely, saying European leaders don't want his supplies. If they don't want it, so be it, he said. The price of gas in Europe looks set to stay high for the foreseeable future, unless alternative supplies can be found. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit subscribe below.